Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: as West wobbles on Ukraine war, China's envoy kicks off European tour. The sound that signaled death for IRA informers. Hedge fund startups on the rise with giant firms under scrutiny. How to pave the way for diplomacy to end the war in Ukraine. Democrats make play for veteran and military support as Trump homes in on GOP nomination. As West wobbles on Ukraine war, China's envoy kicks off European tour. South China Morning Post. China's special envoy for Eurasia, Li Hui, is touring European capitals to test whether China's view of the situation in Ukraine has changed and if it has a role to play in peace talks. China is eager to show itself as a responsible player on the international stage and gain influence in the global arena. However, China's close ties with Russia have dented its image in Ukraine and across Europe. A recent poll found that the majority of Ukrainians hold negative views towards China, and the public perceives China as a hostile country. Despite this, Ukraine is still interested in China playing a mediating role due to its unique position of being welcome in both Moscow and Kiev. However, analysts say that China will need to offer more than just shuttle diplomacy to gain the trust of Ukrainians. China's involvement in peace talks could help legitimize Ukraine's position among countries that are not fully aligned with the West. The sound that signaled death for IRA informers. BBC. British police are expected to publish findings from a 7-year investigation into the role of Freddie Scappaticci, an IRA mole who is alleged to have killed 17 people. Scappaticci, who died last year, was the highest-placed British agent in the IRA. He also acted as chief interrogator for the IRA's internal security unit, which was responsible for the murder and intimidation of alleged informers. The investigation, Operation Canova, is examining the actions of Steakknife and the ISU. The case was brought to light in 1992 when 3 bodies were discovered in South Armagh. The men had been interrogated for 9 days, before being shot through the head. The investigation will also explore the legacy of Steakknife and the ISU, including the families of victims who were interrogated and then murdered by the IRA. The interim findings will be published later this week. Hedge fund startups on the rise with giant firms under scrutiny. Bloomberg. Startups are luring top hedge fund talent away from established managers with the promise of better returns and lower fees for investors. A survey by Barclays found interest in emerging managers was rising after a 2-year decline, while BNP Paribas revealed that 2/3 of investors planning to allocate to hedge funds would seek new relationships rather than adding to existing ones. The study by Barclays also showed that investors were looking for more nimble managers capable of generating higher returns. The average multi-manager only achieved a return just above the risk-free rate in 2023. However, some of the largest funds still closed to fresh capital are the best performers. Startups also face a challenging capital-raising environment, but the data shows green shoots are emerging. How to pave the way for diplomacy to end the war in Ukraine. Foreign Affairs. The war in Ukraine is likely to end in negotiations, according to key players including Russia's President Vladimir Putin and the U.S. National Security Council. However, there is currently no sign that negotiations will start anytime soon, as both sides believe that reaching an acceptable deal is currently impossible. The absence of dialogue makes it difficult to discern an adversary's intentions, and therefore it is necessary to open channels of communication to be in a position to pursue peace when the opportunity arises. All parties should take steps now to bring about the possibility of talks in the future. This includes talking about talking and making conflict diplomacy a key subject of bilateral and multilateral interactions. Signals of openness to negotiations could include changes in rhetoric, the appointment of special envoys for negotiations, self-imposed limitations on deep strikes, and prisoner-of-war swaps. Mutual mistrust and assumptions of maximalist intentions make it challenging to take the first step toward the negotiating table. However, neither side can know for sure about the other's intentions without talking, and the cost of not doing so is high in terms of human life and regional stability. The West should begin by discussing conflict diplomacy among themselves and bringing the issue to the table in engagements with Ukraine. This would demonstrate a commitment to enabling an eventual negotiated end to the war. Adjusting rhetorical emphasis in public statements and appointing special representatives for conflict diplomacy would be important signals to Russia. Moscow, in turn, could suspend strikes on Ukrainian cities, indicate a willingness to enact a prisoner-of-war swap, and cease inflammatory rhetoric. Kiev could soften its decree against negotiating with President Putin and reciprocate by ceasing strikes in Russia. These efforts would begin the process of moving towards eventual talks, avoiding an endless and destructive war. Democrats make play for veteran and military support as Trump homes in on GOP nomination. Associated Press. Progressive groups are attempting to make gains among the military and veteran communities in the U.S. The groups are targeting several states, including Texas, California, Virginia, and North Carolina, where there are high numbers of active service members and veterans. While the military and veteran community has traditionally supported Republicans, Democratic groups are hoping to use President Donald Trump's unorthodox foreign policy and past comments against him to win over some of these voters. Trump won the support of around 60% of military veterans and just over half of those with a veteran in the household in the 2020 election. In the South Carolina Republican primary, 2/3 of military veterans and those in veteran households voted for Trump. However, progressive groups such as Common Defense and VoteVets are making efforts to persuade these groups of voters to back Democratic candidates. North Carolina's congressional delegation headed for a shakeup with 5 open seats and party shifts. Associated Press. Primaries on Tuesday marked the start of what will likely be a big change in the composition of the U.S. House delegation in North Carolina. Given past election results, the changes seem likely to transform a delegation now made up of 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to one with 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. In the wake of the redistricting changes, 5 of the 14 incumbents are not running for another term. Red Sea data cables cut as Yemen's Houthis claim latest ship strike. South China Morning Post. 3 undersea cables, reportedly damaged by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea, have disrupted internet and telecommunications in the region. The cables affected include Asia-Africa-Europe 1, the Europe-India Gateway, CCOM, and TGN Gulf. Hong Kong-based HGC Global Communications said the damage has affected 25% of the traffic flowing through the Red Sea. China has described the Red Sea as crucial for data moving from Asia to Europe. The Houthis have denied targeting the cables. The rebels have been using the Red Sea to disrupt global shipping in their attempt to pressure Israel to end its war on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The Houthis will continue to prevent Israeli navigation or those heading to the ports of occupied Palestine until the aggression is stopped and the siege on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip is lifted, said Brigadier General Yahya Sari, a Houthi military spokesman. China defense spending to climb 7.2% as she pursues build-up. Bloomberg. China's defense spending is set to increase by 7.2% this year, the highest in 5 years. Military expenditure by the central government is projected to reach 1.67 trillion Chinese yuan, $231 billion, in 2024. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has set a 2027 deadline for China's military to become a world-class force, but concerns are growing that corruption is impeding this ambition. The People's Liberation Army Daily has pledged to continue fighting corruption in the defense sector. The U.S. recently warned that China is expanding its nuclear weapons arsenal and boosting its military capabilities in space. How Gaza ceasefire became a focal point in Barbara Lee's U.S. Senate campaign. Al Jazeera. California Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who was the sole dissenter in the House of Representatives' vote to authorize military action in Afghanistan after 9/11, is running in California's Senate primary on her credentials as an anti-war candidate. This time, her focus is on achieving a ceasefire in Gaza. Lee has reiterated her call for a ceasefire in Gaza dozens of times on her social media accounts, making it a defining element of her campaign, and she has been endorsed by prominent progressives who are supportive of Palestinian rights. However, Lee's campaign has struggled to keep up with the fundraising of her Democratic rivals Adam Schiff and Katie Porter, who enjoy more institutional support. Schiff, in particular, is a staunch defender of Israel and has voted with the Republican majority in favor of a $17.6 billion aid bill for Israel. Despite this, Lee's supporters hope that her stance on the issue will carry her to victory. The Senate race in California is scheduled to arrive on Super Tuesday, a crucial date in the U.S. electoral calendar. Man who leaked Pentagon secrets about Ukraine war agrees to plea deal with at least 11 years jail. ABC. A member of the United States Air National Guard has pleaded guilty to leaking highly classified military documents about the war in Ukraine and other national security secrets. Jack Teixeira made a deal with prosecutors on Monday that requires him to serve between 11 and 17 years in prison. The 22-year-old admitted illegally collecting some of the nation's most sensitive secrets and sharing them with other users on Discord, a social media platform popular with people playing online games. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the sixth dimension. Today, we've got a diverse range of news stories to discuss. From China's envoy touring Europe to the IRA informer investigation, hedge fund startups, and the potential for diplomacy in Ukraine. We'll also touch upon progressive groups targeting military and veteran support, changes in North Carolina's congressional delegation, undersea cables damaged in the Red Sea, China's defense spending, Barbara Lee's campaign for a Gaza ceasefire, and the guilty plea of a member of the U.S. Air National Guard for leaking classified documents. Now, let's dive into these stories and analyze them with a touch of wit and humor. First up, China's special envoy Li Hui is embarking on a European tour to gauge China's role in peace talks regarding Ukraine. China wants to be seen as a responsible player on the global stage, but its close ties with Russia have made Ukrainians wary. Perhaps China needs to offer more than just shuttle diplomacy to gain their trust. After all, Ukrainians don't want just any fortune cookie wisdom, they want real action. Speaking of actions with consequences, British police are set to publish findings from a 7-year investigation into IRA mole Freddie Scappaticci. This guy was not just any mole, he was the highest-placed British agent in the IRA. Talk about playing both sides of the field. The investigation will also delve into the actions of the IRA's internal security unit, responsible for the murder of alleged informers. Let's hope they can uncover the truth and bring some closure to the families affected. In the finance world, hedge fund startups are on the rise, luring talent away from established managers. These startups promise better returns and lower fees, but let's hope they don't end up like a certain popular ice cream flavor that melts away quickly. Investors are looking for nimble managers who can generate higher returns, but they should remember that not all that glitters is gold. Sometimes, it's just a shiny pyramid scheme. Now, let's talk about the war in Ukraine. It seems that negotiations are the likely path to ending the conflict, but both sides are hesitant to start talking. It's like a never-ending game of charades where no one wants to make the first move. But if they don't start talking soon, they might as well join a mimes convention. So, let's hope the West takes the lead and opens up channels of communication. Otherwise, it's just a staring contest with no winners. Shifting gears to US politics, progressive groups are vying for support among the military and veteran communities. They're hoping to use President Trump's unorthodox foreign policy and past comments to win over some of these traditionally Republican voters. It's an interesting strategy, trying to turn the tide with the wind at their backs. But can they convince veterans to march to a different beat? In North Carolina, primaries are signaling a big change in the state's congressional delegation. With redistricting changes and incumbents not running for re-election, we might see a transformation from 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. It's like a political makeover, with new faces and fresh ideas. Let's see if they can bring some harmony to the Capitol. Now, let's take a dive into the Red Sea, where undersea cables have been damaged by Houthi rebels, disrupting internet and telecommunications in the region. It's like a game of underwater Jenga gone wrong. China is particularly concerned about the damage, as the Red Sea is crucial for data moving from Asia to Europe. The Houthis deny targeting the cables, but they've been causing quite a splash in their attempts to pressure Israel. It's like they're playing a high-stakes game of battleship. Moving on, China's defense spending is set to increase by 7.2% this year. They're on a mission to become a world-class force by 2027, but concerns about corruption are surfacing. Let's hope they don't spend all that money on swanky military parades and fancy uniforms. After all, it's not about the size of your military, it's how you use it. In the US, Congresswoman Barbara Lee is running for Senate on her anti-war credentials, particularly her call for a ceasefire in Gaza. She's making it a defining element of her campaign, hoping to win over progressive voters. It's like she's playing a game of political chess, strategically positioning herself to capture the hearts of the electorate. But will her stance be enough to secure victory? Only time will tell. Lastly, a member of the U.S. Air National Guard has pleaded guilty to leaking highly classified military documents about the war in Ukraine. Jack Teixeira made a deal with prosecutors and faces a significant prison sentence. It's like a real-life game of Where's Waldo with national security secrets. But let's hope this serves as a reminder that leaking classified information is no game. And there you have it, a whirlwind of news from around the world. Now, it's your turn. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any burning questions or insightful comments? Let's open up the floor for discussion. The sixth dimension is all ears. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.